Greetings, peace, salutations. O genki desu ka? I hope that you are well as you tap into the paper plane. Um, uh, it's these episodes are coming few and far between as of late, because life has been absolutely lifing. I know the last time we checked in um, with my fabulous previous guest, Lazaga Sudan. I had like my car's engine had died, COVID had hit my house, and now I'm just getting over the hump of the fall semester. And man, unbelievable. Almost about a month until the end of the semester. And so, this is the kind of point in the semester where, students are really scrambling and or, some small handful, are potentially withdrawing from the class because mathematically they can't pass if they haven't kind of kept up with things. But, the vast majority have been, thugging it out, doing their absolute best amidst the madness of the world, amidst the madness of late stage capitalism, all of these things. But yeah, I am very happy to be jumping back into another episode. Every single one is very special to me. And with that, the Paper Plane is a podcast created and hosted by myself, Colin Masashi Roha Hio Ehara, where I interview people I am blessed and honored to share community with, asking them about a book or books that have had a transformative impact on their lives. And in a society where literacy rates are steadily declining, our attention spans and critical consciousness are under attack, and a growing number of podcasts hosted by cishet men consciously or unconsciously champion expressions of masculinity that come at the expense of women, femmes, LGBTQIA Two-Spirit Plus, and especially BIPOC folks. This space imperfectly aims to operate as a counter narrative to those things. The Paper Plane is a space that intends to highlight the dire importance of relationships, community, dialogue, perpetual learning, honest expression as art, art as honest expression, freedom for literacy, and literacy for freedom. It speaks to planes of existence attached to the act of reading, but also as a metaphor for the flights we take as we sit in what Ta-Nehisi Coates calls a one-way interface as readers and how these journeys shape us. Today, hey, we are joined by my dear sister, comrade, beloved friend, Pamela Chavez. So she and I met roughly 2 decades ago at UC Santa Cruz via mutual friends who came together due to our love for art, for music, for activism, liberatory education, and being hella fucking silly together as we made a path by walking it. She is someone I haven't continued to admire, to learn profoundly from via her contagious courage as a woman of color artist, youth advocate, cultural worker, and community member, busting her ass to be her boldest, baddest, biggest, and most brilliant self in the face of all the dehumanizing and oppressive fuckery our society and world has to offer. A true, real one. Um, Pamela Chavez is a Costa Rican American animation writer, director, and visual storyteller, shaping bold narratives at the intersection of culture, justice, and imagination. Her work translates complex ideas into emotionally resonant animated experiences that center underrepresented voices and ignite public dialogue. Pamela's films have screened at the Ottawa International Animation Festival, Outfest, and the 92nd Street Y in New York, and are featured on platforms such as PBS Online, HBO Latino, and YouTube. As a director and collaborator, she has created original work for the institutions, including for, sorry, she has created original work for institutions including the LA Philharmonic, Amazon, and the American Medical Association, blending visual storytelling with social impact and clarity of vision. A graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design, Pamela is grounded in traditional animation, oil painting, and stop motion techniques while pushing the boundaries of narrative form to influence how stories are seen, heard, and understood. And it is with that that I am so pleased and excited and happy and honored to welcome my fam, Pamela, into the virtual building. Pam, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
Hi, Colin. Wow. Excited, happy, so many things. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for opening this space, and I'm just super excited to be a part of this conversation.
Oh, that's so sweet, family.
Mhm.
Thank you so, so much. You didn't hear it, but I just, did your amazing intro. And I'm really, really excited to talk about this book because, as I've shared with you, this is like also one of my favorite graphic novels of all time. Um, I remember years ago, like 15, maybe something like that. Em and I going to New York, to visit, the homies out there. Um, and I just read this. I think my brother maybe like had it and like lent it to me. Because I was like reading a ton of graphic novels during that time. But Persepolis had become, been turned into an animated film. And it was like showing at this one like really small like independent movie theater in New York City. And I was like, and we got to go. And so, I took her and she was like, what is this? What is this about? And like, walked out like just like tears coming out of our eyes. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so Persepolis is a series of autobiographical graphic novels by Marjane Satrapi that depict her childhood and early adult years in Iran and Austria during and after the Islamic Revolution. The title Persepolis is a reference to the ancient capital of the Persian Empire. Originally published in French, Persepolis has been translated into many other languages. As of 2018, it has sold more than 2 million copies worldwide. French comics publisher Association published the original work in 4 volumes between 2000 and 2003. Pantheon Books and John Cape published the English translations in 2 volumes, one in 2003, the other in 2004, and omnibus editions in French and English filed in 2007, coinciding with the theatrical release of the film adaptation. And due to its graphic language and images, there is controversy surrounding the use of Persepolis in classrooms in the United States. Funny how that go. Persepolis was featured on the American Library Association's list of top 10 most challenged books in 2014. What an honor that is.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so, as we jump into things, I'm excited to talk about identity and hybridity, the power of visual language, youthful perspective, memory and storytelling, representation and resistance, medium as message, resilience and humor and legacy and influence, and all the different ways kind of you see these things taking place via this text and this artwork. And so actually, the first question I have for you, kind of pertains to, this paper plane, quote unquote aspect. And it's pretty wide open, but I'm just wondering, when it comes to Persepolis, what kind of quote unquote flights or journeys would you say that this story has taken you on?
Um, yeah, it was a big um influence, I'd say, in my life. And I think that when I think of different planes or different intersections or different places of like rebirth for myself, this book, I think, for me was the start of a new journey.
Hmm.
Um, and it was welcomed in my life at the time. A friend of mine, I think this is how I got it. I'm pretty sure a friend of mine, Tina, gave me the book because she was like, I think you'd like this.
Hmm.
I was like, okay. And so I read it in one sitting. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I love this.
Yeah.
And I think at the time they were finishing or in the midst of finishing the film. So I remember
Okay.
looking at like, the making of.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, it was well, we'll get into the details of it, but it did change the course of my life when I was
Mm.
in my mid-20s.
Wow.
And when I was thinking of what book to talk about, I had to dig through lots of really good stuff out there. But I have to say that for me, this one was the most influential.
Mm, mm.
Hmm.
Awesome. Awesome. And so, to start jumping into, the questions I have for you. So Persepolis navigates the tension between cultural identity and diaspora. As a Costa Rican American artist, working across cultures, wondering how did Satrapi's exploration of identity potentially resonate with your own journey of belonging, self-definition, those kinds of
Hmm.
things?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, this book. like you mentioned, it came out, I think, damn near 20 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe even maybe even further back, maybe 20 something odd years ago.
Yep.
So this was like the mid 2000s, and the world looked very different at that time.
Sure
There's
did.
been a lot of different um, changes. And in some ways it looks very similar, but in the world of like storytelling and media, I would say it's very different, right? And at that time in 2006, for me, I didn't really see representations of women of color or queer people of color. We were still
Mm,
fighting for the right to marry or to, be seen in the world and accepted in some ways. And so at that time, reading this book was just like a reality check that, this is the experiences that I have had, as unique as they were not globally unique. You
mm,
know, they
yep.
they resonated with other people maybe outside of the US. And it just it helped me feel that sense of connection with someone that was Iranian and French, which is wild to me, that I had never met. I didn't know anything about her life, but after I read this, like I knew something a little bit. Um, but she is somebody who was going through or went through a lot of turmoil in her own childhood, just like and I think that that has to do with being a part of the global South in some ways and
Mm,
connected to that world as women of color and just living in this hostile world. And so seeing her experiences, though, they were very different than mine, and really some very specific minor points of connection, but the more general like sense of experiencing loss and experience of longing and
mm,
home and what that means is and that connection on a human level was
yeah.
the thing that really drew me to this book. And it really was the power of what she created in this, and doing it creatively, through a
Mm,
book, through a comic book, was what that's what hooked me.
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
had it been like a novel, I think it'd be good, but just the fact that the images and all that, and the sequencing and the drawings is just, I was like, all right, you're speaking
Mm,
my language,
yeah.
and let me like what does that mean? What can we say to each other? You know?
Mm. Oh, that's so beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
it immediately made me think of, James Baldwin when he says, I have it here. He says, "You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me the most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive or who had ever been
Hmm.
alive."
Hmm.
And so like, and, I'm thinking, particularly, as like a former English teacher of many years about kind of words, right? But then also, this added element that you're just speaking to of, the visual, and how just like gorgeous it is, right? And so,
Hmm.
as I'm kind of thinking about the power of visual language, I have this question for you.
Hmm.
So, Satrapi uses stark black and white imagery to convey the gravity of political oppression in a lot of ways. Is like kind of one take on it, right? And I'm
Hmm.
wondering, how do you see the role of visual style in amplifying or complicating social justice narratives that you bring to life through animation in your artwork?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that what was so visually stunning about Satrapi's work is that it was black and white, super simple. It's not overcomplicated. It's visually like what you see is what you get, right?
Mm,
And um, it speaks to the amplification of simplifying something that's been made complicated, which, her life was not easy. The politics of Iran and and the history of that region is for Western, I think, ideology is quote unquote complicated. It's not something that we're taught very often, which I
yeah.
think is a part of our own undoing and something we need to really consider. But she simplified something that historically has so much depth to it, and and is quite difficult to mend.
Mm.
And she did it in black and white.
Yeah.
She was kind of just like, I mean, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she was just like, fuck you, I'm not going to complicate this.
Mm.
You know, I'm
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
keep this real simple.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful in that sense. And I think that it speaks to artists' decisions and artists being able to have that license to make a choice about how they want to share their world.
Mm.
And she chose it in black and white. And I think it worked really well for the storyline that she had. And um, I think that for me, I think bringing and amplifying stories that are specific to social justice issues through animation is my medium, and it's a chosen medium because of the world that we're in right now in 2025. Like, animation is a way to reach people,
Mm.
and but again, going back to sort of like visual language, I think as artists, like I think that it takes sometimes a while to identify who we are within our own character and quality of expression, our own style. It could take a
Yeah.
lifetime,
Sure.
sometimes. It's like
Absolutely.
it's for writers, for anyone really who's an artist. It takes a long time to really perfect and hone your craft. And
Mhm.
I think a part of that search is trying to figure out what we're trying to say and why our style fits us,
Mm.
and what it has to say about the world. If that's the kind of artist that you are, which I consider myself to be, and I think that this book definitely is. And so I'm still on my search, I'm
Mm.
evolving still as an artist.
Sure.
I think she is too, she went on to make the animated version of this, and then she actually went into doing um live action movies too. So
Oh, wow.
she evolved, yeah, in her expression. And I think it's just such a good, again, it's like a pathway, right? It's a roadmap of what's possible in our expression and using whatever is like motivating us the most
Yeah.
to speak to the topic at hand that we want to express. And I think that's that power of the visual art and communication and sharing and storytelling.
That's so dope.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
made me think of a couple things. Made me think of one of my mentors, shout out Dr. Alison Tintianco Cubales,
Hey, shout out to the
professor,
mentors.
professor at SF State in ethnic studies. And one thing that I've always remembered that she would say is pain plus love equals growth.
Hmm.
And I think about, kind of the different elements in, all the folks in our community of navigating, pain and challenge and struggle, and also the different ways that like we've been able and willing to grow because of, the elements, different elements of love that we've also received. And
Hmm.
thinking about, Marjan, I feel like literally paints a picture of kind of
Hmm.
that taking place. But then it also
Hmm.
made me think of last week, Em and I, I bought for her birthday, I bought her tickets to see Nas with the symphony. Um,
Hmm.
and just like thinking about, like his like starting with like Illmatic and being like 19, 20 years old.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
like being this like, dude in his 50s wearing a tuxedo with a symphony behind him.
That's awesome.
And just like wow, like just like crazy. Yeah, like the different like trajectory.
Yeah, that's an evolution right
Yeah,
there.
right, that you were
Yeah.
speaking to.
Yeah.
Um, but to kind of, bring it back to you were speaking to the piece around, you were like, I didn't want to put words in her mouth, but she's the type to be like, fuck you, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, right? And,
Yeah.
and I could totally see, particularly the first, section of Persepolis, there's like two
Hmm.
books when she's
Hmm.
like a child, right? And so thinking
Hmm.
about youth perspective, one of the striking aspects of Persepolis is how it centers a child's point of view, particularly with regards to like war and revolution, political
Hmm.
upheaval. All right, and for you as someone that's committed to youth-centered cultural work, I'm wondering what, do you think is uniquely powerful about framing political cultural upheaval through a young narrator, through the eyes of a young person?
Yeah. What a sentence. What a sentence, like how to frame political and cultural upheaval through the voice of a young person, right?
Yeah.
Um, That's probably one of the things that drew me the most to this book. I read the second book, but frankly can't remember it as much as the first one, which is the one where she's young.
Yep.
And that would be, it just spoke to me more. And I think it's the innocence in children
Mm,
that allows us to see a part of ourselves. It's almost like a way to self-reflect as humanity
hmm.
within children and their wisdom because they parrot things that we say, right?
Yeah.
They parrot our beliefs, they parrot our disbeliefs, they parrot like our untruths, right? And
Yeah.
it's like you see them doing it right in front of you, and it's an opportunity to see yourself differently, right? And so in this
Mm,
book, seeing this little girl parrot really heavy topics like torture
yeah.
and rage and death
Yeah.
and violence and war, um, to me is a moment to be able to reflect. Like Marjane is helping us be able to reflect on who we are as humans. Like
Mm,
for a child to be able to say those things, like what does that say? Like, and I think her in her own reflection of creating this, I'm curious what she would say about her own life. But I think that that's the wisdom that children carry. I
yeah.
think
Yep.
yes, they have that innocence, but they don't lie. Like they
Yeah.
just they tell. I mean, they're little fibs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not like they're like little
Yeah.
saints
Yeah.
or anything, but they when it comes to this kind of stuff, it's just they're giving us the cold hard truth of who we are as humans, right? And who we are as people. And um, I really liked that. I liked the truth in that. I liked the ability to self-reflect
Mm,
um, through their own perspective and seeing that in it's like this meta thing, right? So you're
yeah.
seeing them reflect their world, and then we're reading it and seeing it in the graphic novel. So it's this dynamic of being in a world where we're immersed in the graphic novel perspective of this child or children. And for me, um, that spoke to me because I I think for me it was important to understand my connection to immigration when I was young and what it meant to me as a child
Mm,
and its rawness and its truth. And yes, I would parrot or I would like repeat some of the beliefs that my parents had, but at my core, in my essence, immigration for me felt like loss. It felt like grief. It
mm,
felt like
yeah.
leaving. It felt like disconnection. And I think it inspired my own short film, and it inspired me to tell it through the voice of a young girl, which is exactly how Marjane told this story, and that came specifically from this book. That wasn't something I just came up with on my own. It was
Mm,
through her guidance,
wow.
as an
Wow.
as an illustrator, as a storyteller.
Hmm.
And there's these panels that I kind of wanted to highlight. There's two panels
Sure.
within Persepolis, and I'll describe them so that folks that are listening can kind of have an idea. But the first panel is Marjane, and she's probably like, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7. And there's three of her. It's just one right next to the other. It's placed horizontally on a panel. It's black and white, very simple illustration. And the caption above it reads, I wanted to be justice, love, and the wrath of God all in one. In the first version of her, she's holding the scales of justice. In the second, she has like her two fingers up, and I think that's like representation of love. And in the third, the wrath of God,
Mm,
where she's holding like a scepter and a and a shield. And this is sort of, going back to what I was talking about, like we're seeing complicated adult ideology here, right? This
hmm.
is like we're seeing like some heavy stuff, talking
For
about
sure.
justice and wrath of God, right? Maybe love is less of a huge like like um concept, but I mean, I guess it also can be, but we're seeing society here, right? And we're seeing her sort of parrot the things that like underneath what she's trying to say is that she wants there to not be suffering and for there to be balance and love,
Mm,
right? So that's what I see under this, but I also see us, I see our complications as adults. I see
yep.
the ways in which we interpret that desire for there not to be suffering in the world, through this image, through her storytelling. And again, I think it's just going back to just what young people do. It just helps us see ourselves clearly.
Mm, that's so oof, just hitting me in so many different ways and different times. I mean, I think about my many years working with, with children, adolescents. I think about like,
Mhm.
raising two small children that are also raising me simultaneously in so many
Mhm.
different ways, right? And then, so much of what you're speaking to makes me think about, like just like in my experience, particularly like in this last period, I've had a lot of conversations and noticed a lot of like folks talking about what I would what I would refer to as midlife awakenings, not necessarily crises,
Mhm.
but folks like really, and particularly I've had like really explicit conversations with folks talking about getting in touch with their inner child, right? In
Mhm.
this particular
Mhm.
like part of their life. And so, I think a lot of the things you were speaking to around like, what does it look like for us to be back in like working towards reconnecting with our inner child if we've,
Mhm.
really felt disconnected from that, and like what does it look like for us to be in dialogue with our inner child? What does our inner child have to like say that that will really really help us and will really like kind of
Mhm.
remind us and will really speak truth to power, as far as like something I would explain to students, to the best of my ability was like, and I'm thinking when I was teaching middle school, high school,
Mhm.
was, when I talk about oppression, right? And I would talk about how, adultism or ageism is an interesting thing because you start out as the oppressed as a child, as a young person. And then
Mhm.
like, as like, I'm like a 43-year-old dude. I'm like kind of at the pinnacle of like the oppressor role with regards to adultism and ageism. But then as
Mhm.
you get older and older, if I'm fortunate enough to become an elder, right? I'm a senior
Mhm.
citizen, then you become oppressed again, and people like don't take you as seriously and these kinds of things under late stage capitalism and these things. Um, but I guess all of this is to I wanted to ask you kind of to any degree you'd feel comfortable sharing, when you, because you spoke a little bit about this around your animated feature,
Mhm.
you know when you're kind of in the process of creating art, are there times where you feel like you consciously or unconsciously have conversations with your inner child and
Mhm.
baby Pamela?
Mhm. Hey, that's such a good question. Thank you for asking it. I think, you know, working on my inner child has been such a evolution over time. There's different points that I've done so, and um for different reasons, addressing like different traumas of my life. And when I decided to make my short, um I knew it was going to be about immigration and about coming from Costa Rica and what that perspective was. And like I said earlier, and I knew it was going to be in connection to my little Pamela self, because that's
Mhm.
also the time I was 6 years old when this happened, or 7. And and then I also knew I wanted to be as true as possible to that perspective as I could, and not project my adult like un unresolved issues as
Sure.
much as I could, right? As much as I could. I don't
Mm.
know if you ever truly do it, but
Yeah, yeah.
so I knew that I didn't want it to be about like this rageful like memoir or story about like why I hate the US, or like, US political agendas.
Sure.
As much as, the adult in me wanted to, I was like, that's not what little Pamela was concerned about.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't even understand where I was.
Yeah,
I
sure.
was just traveling, quote
Hmm.
unquote. And
Yep.
so, so for me, I had to do some of that healing before working on this film,
Mm-hmm.
and intentionally so.
Yeah.
And having people give me feedback on that specific ask for myself.
Mm,
So making sure that like the story editor, who's also my godmother, my mentor,
mm,
Aurora Guerrero,
mm,
who, she would read it, she would give me feedback, she let me know, like amongst many other edits, she would say like this doesn't read as a child or this reads
mm.
as like this other thing. And so it was important for me to be tapped in to that
Absolutely.
like self work or or the work around, healing some of that, or at least being able to be aware of it, right? Maybe
Yeah.
the healing comes and goes, and it's a work in progress, but the
Mm,
awareness of when you're speaking as an adult or when your child self is speaking
mm,
is at least like part of what I wanted to make sure I had like my finger on that, and
mm,
I didn't want it to get out of control, and especially because I don't know if Persepolis is a book that's made for children.
mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question,
Mm.
but my film was made for children, very specifically.
Yeah.
So
Love it.
because I knew that that was who I wanted my audience to be,
Yep.
like I had to explore the world in a different way. My perspective had to be a little bit different. So
Definitely.
I don't think that she made this for children necessarily, like for the younger ones.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe she, I don't know. I don't know what she would say.
Mm,
But I think you have to be mindful, of like what you say and how you're representing it and what you want to say, and without getting too lost in that and getting too heady and just being creative. So um yeah, thank you for that question.
yeah, of course, of course. And like you said earlier, shout out to the mentors.
Shout out to the mentor.
If memory serves me, Aurora, she's like grew up in Richmond, El Cerrito area, right?
Yeah, El Cerrito.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, yeah, and in the vein, right, of memory storytelling, right? So, the book is both like this personal memoir and also
Mhm.
historical testimony. Like, I knew very little, if anything, about the Iranian Revolution, for example, before
Mhm.
coming across this. And so I'm wondering, how do you attempt to navigate like this kind of tightrope walk, this balance between like intimate storytelling on the one hand and then kind of collective history in your own work? What lessons can or have you drawn from Marjane's approach through Persepolis?
Yeah, I think that is where my own sense of curiosity and like my personal challenge to myself was. It's kind of like right storytelling when you're incorporating like personal memoir and history is like it's like telling yourself you want to run a marathon, and, and like and like you're still like on the couch and haven't run in years, like, all right, so I want to take this challenge on, but how
Yeah.
do I do it, right? Like, and
Yeah.
like, why would I
Trying
want
to
to
psych
put
yourself
myself?
up.
Yeah, like you have to psych yourself up, and then you got to ask yourself, like, why do I want to do this? And at its core, it's just like because it's inspiring to me, right?
Mm,
It motivates me. I want to. It feels like the kind of challenge I want to take on, right? Just like maybe
yeah.
a marathon is. Not that I've ever done one. Um, what I would imagine a marathon is. You've done a couple, right?
I've done a half. It
Yeah,
was
that
killer.
counts. Yeah, I mean, like, what would motivate you to do that, right? So many
Mhm.
things, I imagine,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, so that was the challenge is like giving myself this personal, like super hard goal to meet.
Hmm.
And I also kind of wanted to prove that animation could be a medium for that.
Hmm.
A lot of
Absolutely.
the animation we're familiar with is like um, it gives us happy endings,
Um,
and
yep.
that's fine. I like a good animated happy ending for sure, like a good story, and but I wanted to understand what it means to use the medium as a form of telling more complicated you know, lines of truth. And
Mm,
so I invited it. I invited it. I nerded out. I was like able to really go into the depths of trying to be creative and tell a story that was going to inform people, but also not feel like it's a documentary.
mm,
So storytelling at its essence, using,
yeah,
all those pillars of storytelling and yeah, so that's what I learned from reading her book. I just learned that it's possible to tell a story in a different way that resonates with me and my style and who I am. And I don't have to give it a happy ending. I
yeah.
can if I want, but sometimes I just, it's not what you want to say. So, yeah.
Mm. Man, storytelling, as you know, like means so much to me, and I think that, just like I love the ways you're describing kind of, like picking apart like the art and science of it all, right? And like, one of the many things that I love about you is your, kind of uncanny ability to fight and fight to ensure that your heart and your mind like are never divorced,
Hmm.
right? And I think about that in the same way I think about like art and science, right? And so I don't know, just like my mind's going like 10,000 places thinking about like this particular graphic novel in how
Mhm.
Satrapi's thinking about like how she does this, like versus, it's like the first one, like the first section as, this little girl, and then the second one,
Mhm.
like if I'm not mistaken, in that second one, she is now in Austria and like
Mhm.
a young adult, like probably the age we were when we like first picked this up,
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but yeah, what a trip. Um, and
Yeah, it's a trip to read something that is so like what pressure she must have felt
oof,
to write this. Like maybe not, because she is, very rebellious in her like
yeah.
in the fabric of her being, but maybe there is a part of her that felt that pressure, to get it right in her own
Mhm.
way.
Sure, absolutely. Well, yeah, in the vein of rebelliousness, right? Persepolis has been challenged, even banned in some places for its political
Mhm.
themes in these funny ass, scary ass times. And I'm wondering, how do you think censorship intersects with representation, especially when like today, underrepresented, marginalized voices are pushing back against dominant, if not growingly authoritarian fascist narratives of white
Mhm.
supremacy, cis heteropatriarchy, um, all those ugly things.
Yeah. I mean, it's understandable and bear with me here. It's understandable for its like I would say it's like portrayal of the a truthful graphic nature of the world, right?
Mm,
That maybe this isn't something that's appropriate in elementary school, right? Maybe. Um, but I think that there is something to say about censorship for the purpose of quieting dissent and opposition
mm,
of
mm,
perspective,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
So that yours could stand alone and above everyone else's, or censorship for the purpose of timing and timely rollout, and for being able to hold something in its truest essence and value. And I think that what I mean by that is I feel like we can say, like, as adults, like, okay, having this, maybe having a book like this, which is can be graphic, right? And hard to read
mm,
for a little mind. Whether or not they've been exposed to this kind of information is worth pairing with like a classroom or an adult
mm-hmm.
who can help them through this kind of literature and help them extract like the power of what it is, right?
Yeah.
There's so many gems in this. And I think, but that's not what's happening. It's like, it's just censorship for dissent. Like it's
Mhm.
just censorship from like just quiet voices.
Yeah.
There's no thoughtfulness to it. It's just
Mhm.
like, well, it's just terrorists. It's a terrorist book or it's a
Yep.
communist book. And do we even know what the fuck that means anymore to be saying that? It's 2025. Like
Yeah.
communism isn't like what it was in the, in the 1930s, or
Mhm.
1920s or 1910s. Like what does that mean? And
Yep.
why are we still kind of giving circle to a definition that I don't even know people, I don't know if people really understand it. Like what does that mean for us today and age, right?
Yep. Yeah, it makes me think of, yeah, DEI, CRT, just these things that have become these kind of catch-alls that, people can't even define generally, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but ironically, I think where my mind is going is just thinking about, like, just heavily declining literacy rates and how
Mm-hmm.
that can be directly correlated with, just historically societies falling victim to authoritarianism, people losing
Mm-hmm.
their rights because of lack, inability um, to be able to think critically.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it makes sense to me, exactly kind of like, what you're laying out that, they would not want this in the hands of, say, young people in a classroom with, a teacher that's well resourced to support those young people in,
Mm-hmm.
not teaching them what to think, but teaching them, giving them tools around how to think in, ways that are critically conscious,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately setting those young people up to be smarter, even more well
Mm-hmm.
equipped
Mm-hmm.
than themselves as the educator in the adult in the room. Um, and there's something very, very special I feel like that happens. One of my homegirls, dear friend of mine who is a professor at DVC in English, teaches a class on the graphic novel as literature. And just like it's one of the most, kind of, people gravitate to it for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to kind of like, she chooses, right, this medium, graphic novel, to tell her story, Satrapi. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm wondering for you, like as an animator, have you kind of reflected on, I'm sure you have, or I should say, how, do you reflect on the choice of medium, whether it's comics, film, animation, as potentially a political act within itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, we spoke to it a little bit earlier, a bit. Animation is relevant right now more than ever because people can watch an entire series on their phones. It's super accessible.
Yeah.
Just the language of society right now. So I think that using it in a way that's outside the norm for me is gives it that sort of edge
Mm,
of,
mm,
using it as a medium as a political act in itself, right? It's
yeah.
not it's not a happy ending. It's difficult, it's challenging. It's a little bit of a mind twist too, because you're using something that can be a cartoon, which we associate with children,
Hmm.
to drive a bigger message
Yeah.
or, tr give truth to some atrocities that are going on. I've done some animation for Human Rights Watch, and one of the
Wow.
specific ones that I did was highlighting. I've done two, or maybe a few more than that, but the two that stand out, one of them highlighted some of the atrocities happening in El Salvador with
Mm,
the prisons there.
hmm.
And there was a lot of testimonies that a journalist had from people firsthand, but obviously folks didn't feel safe to show their faces. So they used audio and then the animation
Oh,
that
wow.
I produced to explain what was going on within the prisons and the human rights violations that were happening,
Yeah.
so that it made it a little bit more like digestible for people.
Hmm.
I
Yep.
think it's using it for a good use, it would be, I think that we're sort of used to seeing the images of people being tortured a little bit too much. And I think that there's a sacredness that, I think we've sort of been desensitized to in our human nature. And I feel like this allows for me to be able to put a little bit of life into these images in a way that feels like, well, I don't know, humanizing in some way.
For
So
sure.
yeah, yeah. So I guess, and with this book as a graphic novel, just I think that for the time it was super important. I still think graphic novels are incredibly important, and it's something I would have on my bucket list of wanting to do.
I
Um,
can't wait.
I know I have it. I have the idea. And it's they feel so timely and excuse me, timeless, right? They're just like,
For
it doesn't
sure.
matter if we have internet and can't watch something on TV, like you could pull out the graphic novel and still see it, and that's gonna last forever. So, I think again, it's just the power of of books and graphic novels, and like how far they can take our conversations and dialogue.
Mm, so
Mhm.
beautifully said.
Mhm.
Um, and thinking about, kind of some of these things of, kind of resilience, of thinking about like how to, I don't know, the thought, like after, kind of you shared these really great thoughts is, I just I really reflect, and I think particularly because, I have like 200 plus students, right? And I get a different sense of kind of vibe and energy in every single one of my classes. But one thing that is, a fucking undercurrent in every single one is that folks are like tired and, at capacity, like more often than not. Right. And so, I think I was like thinking about, what you were talking about, like when it comes to these really like violent, incredibly traumatic forms of dehumanization, right, that are taking place, all over the world. And, particularly with social media, like we can, see live streamed, genocides, like happen
Mhm,
in front of on the
mhm,
phone, like these kinds of things. Like, what are ways that, you can, like you were saying, use animation to, make it so that, we can still engage with these things in ways that, like, when we feel like, our like we're just spread too thin to like look at anything else that, will feel difficult. Uh,
mhm,
I think, that's such an incredibly powerful tool, weapon for self-defense, for humanization.
mhm,
And so when it comes to kind of like, one thing I love so much, I think particularly about raised poor and working class, people of color, is the ability to kind of, um, laugh as medicine, like when need be, right? And
mhm,
and so, so much of, Persepolis, right, is depicting trauma, displacement, exile, violence, right? But often, Satrapi uses wit, humor as these tools, right, of like resilience, of kind of, navigating, resisting, right? And so, I'm wondering, how do you approach balancing difficult truths with levity, with joy, imagination in your work? And I
mhm.
have my own take on that. Like, I think you're brilliant at all those things, but I'm curious, kind of how, in your mind, how do you balance all those things?
Yeah, thank you. I I like how you said it's like a method of self-defense. I never thought of humor as that way, like as like a defensive. I mean I've thought of it just as like a coping thing, but which I think is good, but like self-defense feels a little more like intentional, like you're like a martial artist of humor is just
Well,
like
who's coming to mind was like all of like our favorite stand-up comics, and
yeah.
particularly like stand-up comics of color.
Yeah. Yeah, they are like the samurais of
You feel
like
me? You feel me?
yeah, humor, like being able to just like slice you through with this like all this kind of,
Absolutely.
humor and laugh cry moments.
Yep.
Yeah, you know what? I love the humor parts of this, like the funny parts, like the bewildering parts, the curiosity parts, and that I mean that's where I think that again this does kind of work for like a younger audience because of those moments. It's just it feels like okay, like you can ground us again in this perspective.
Mm.
But it's complicated and but I think it's everything to be able to put humor and like jokes in this type of storytelling is exactly what you just said. It's just like uplifting our ability to just tap into our souls, outside of atrocity,
Mm-hmm.
outside of
Mm-hmm.
like trauma.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's almost like this ability to um be alive. I think humor does
Yeah.
that, and joy does that, is it allows you to be alive. It allows you to, in the face of so much death and war and suffering and destruction and complication and confusion, it's very simple. Like if you laugh, like, and you feel joy, you are at peace, you know? Like
Hmm.
there's those moments where you feel that. And that's another sort of creative challenge, another marathon, if you will, of like
Hmm. Hmm.
creating something that's funny but um meaningful. Like,
Yep.
like you said, like our favorite comedians do. Um, and it's so hard. It's so hard to do. It's a hard
Absolutely.
craft. I give comedians lots of props because crazy writing skills, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Hmm.
but it's a big, I love that part of it. I love that it's can be sweet and endearing, and it's like how can a book about so much crazy stuff also be heartwarming in that sense, you know? It's just
Yeah,
says a lot about this person's ability to craft something.
totally.
Freaking craftsman, you
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I just think about, the different moments, particularly in the first one, right, where it's just like, I think particularly like her from the like child's point of view, and little girl's point of view, maybe it's
know.
more specifically, like her, in these funny, like gentle ways, you know, like realizing like, oh, like adults aren't like they don't have it all together. Like they're not as smart as they kind of like, project themselves to
Hmm.
be. And she's like really keen on that and like, and she like the way she's like identifying the patriarchy and like how stupid and fucked up and illogical it
Hmm.
is.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
just like it's so it's just like I'm just like yeah, and it just feels so like just so clever,
Yeah.
you know?
Clever, clever, and then what you just use a word that I think really resonated with me, and it's gentle.
Mm,
There's a like to make something gentle that's like in the midst of this is the fucking revolution right there. You know, that's it. That's like you're not like lost in the despair and bitterness and anger and aggression of it all. You're just
yeah.
like still gentle, like fuck,
The rose that grew from concrete.
Yeah,
Mm.
the soft petals, it's so gentle. It's just, I love that. Yeah.
Man, well, like so I just look back and yeah, so this was written in 2000. Um, it's originally published in 4 volumes between 2000 and 2003. Damn, so that's like 25 years, yo. And
Hmm.
so, and it's lovely that like we're talking about it today, right? As we close out
Yeah.
2025, right? And so
Mhm.
kind of on this note of legacy and influence, right? So many credit Persepolis with expanding the possibilities of what graphic novels could achieve as cultural
Mhm.
texts. And I'm wondering, how has the book influenced your thinking about the potential of visual storytelling to ignite public dialogue, to shape your own and others' cultural memory? Like if you could think about, down the line.
Mm. Yeah, I think, I mean, it's almost like it has to kind of accompany a history book. It's just,
Hmm. Yeah,
I
it's
wouldn't
true.
say it's a history book in itself, but it can accompany as a perspective. Like if we
Hmm.
if history books weren't linear and having to all just be in one thing, you know, it can in one book in one like dissected,
Mm.
curated form, like if we can include things like this, I think it would be, you know, really beautiful. And I think that's the work that a lot of the like professors like you are doing. You know, you're pairing beautiful literature like this with history, with writing, with um, our learning, I think, and in schools and the classrooms. And so, I think it's such a valuable way of teaching. So, thank you for all the work that you do to pair things like this with, the harsh realities that we're identifying and trying to illuminate and reject.
That
Hmm.
is so, so sweet and kind. Thank you so much, Pamela. I mean, you know, there's, I feel like I found like a really stark difference between, like, so the vast majority of my homies that are educators that I'm really, really close to, we tend to have come from, we had like pretty negative schooling experiences and got
Hmm.
into education because we like didn't want anybody to kind of experience what we did or anything similar
Hmm.
to it. But I would argue, in my experience, the vast majority, and I'm like, oh, I'd say this is somebody who's been in grad school twice. So I don't know if that was a great decision, but the vast majority of folks that that go into teaching, it's it's because it's like that was their safe place and thing they like think they're really comfortable there and like
Hmm.
and then so I think particularly when it comes to teaching folks coming from working class backgrounds regardless of color or culture, right, like but especially if they're Black, Indigenous, or people of color, a lot of the folks that I come across, I think it's like 70 to 80%, if not more of that, of the teaching force in K through 12 is white, right? And like so if you are coming into a space where your kind of assumption is this is a safe space and everybody should feel comfortable here, and then you're like just totally perplexed when somebody like is comes from a legacy of schools being a site of miseducation, of people being, say, ripped from their families, like indigenous folks around the world, right?
Hmm.
That like it's like perplexing and confusing to them when people are like, I don't want to be in this classroom, and I
Hmm.
and I,
Hmm.
I dislike it. And I think so many people that inspired me to go into teaching, like those are the students that they like are looking to connect with first, right? Um and and I feel like this text, right, was so like written for those who felt like they you know had to grow into being comfortable in discomfort,
Hmm.
and I think that's like one of the many reasons I love it so much and why I see so many people being drawn to it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but I'm curious, to, it's kind of like whether it's in, your work as an artist, as an educator, as a youth cultural worker, um,
Hmm.
what are some of the ways that you have seen kind of comfort and and discomfort
Hmm.
play roles in kind of like the art you produced, or the art you're drawn to,
Hmm.
or the ways that you see young people
Hmm.
drawn to art.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that the discomfort is when you were talking, it feels like for me as the kind of artist that I've chosen to be is more on the like behind the scenes end. It's on the me when what I'm working on at the moment, why I want to share what I want to share,
Mm,
what's happening for me in life, figuring out how to balance like my work and my life as an artist. Um, all of those things, and then just like taking in what's happening in the world and thinking about like what I want to say and how do I want to like make an impact in the world, like what's my purpose as an
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah.
I think that those things speak to what happened before I even put pen to paper,
Mm.
ink to canvas, or Apple Pencil to iPad, like like so the discomfort is there and it happens before. And then when everything sort of clicks and is set into motion and just in the art of it all, I'm sure that
Mm.
you can relate to this as a lyricist, as a rapper, and being able to like be in the flow of something is sort of the place of connection where you just feel like your purpose in life is like in alignment with
Mm.
what you are saying and like your expression. Um, so I love that part of making art and being able to like, create and actually be in the creation process of something. Um, and then putting it out in the world is like another discomfort. It's not it's not like incredible. It's less discomfortable. It's
Mm.
less uncomfortable than it was before because I feel like I think I used to be a lot more concerned with how things were going to be received, but I think I've chosen to unapologetically create art that is joyful.
Mm.
And um, that is my style. I
Mm.
can't really go into the dark side of things in my artwork. It's just not who I am.
Mm.
I I give a lot of props to people that can tap into that and express that part of themselves.
Yeah.
It takes me out of alignment to do that. I
Mm.
just
Mm.
I can't personally. So it's not a judgment thing. It's like
Oh yeah,
as
no, that's
Pamela,
pure.
like that's what I have to do for myself.
Yeah,
Like I can't.
absolutely.
I don't know if I could put an ounce of more like darkness into my like psyche.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like I said, like the discomfort comes before and like the processing and like what is it I want to say? Why do I want to say it? Damn, okay,
Mm.
let me like evaluate that. Let me think about like, oh, what does that mean about where I am in life? Like, do I still need to heal from those things too? Like what do I need to address still? And then it's that, now it's that pen to paper moment where it's like that's where I feel free.
Mm.
Because I've overcome the discomfort part and now I can just express, you know.
Mm. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
God, that was gorgeous. Um, well, we're beginning to come to the end, and I just, just want to, just I'm just like overflowing with gratitude for, our time together. But,
Oh.
I know that, I know that we're both avid music lovers, and,
Mhm.
the last kind of questions that I ask all my guests is these two pieces. And so the first one is, what is a song, a musical artist, and or an album that you would pair with Persepolis and why?
Yeah. So I'll do you one better. I made a
Hey.
playlist for you.
Oh no, bruh.
So
Hell yeah.
I'll give that to you after. So
Yes.
I
Our
couldn't think of one damn song. I was like, one out. Like, what the fuck?
Oh my God,
But
thank you so much. I can't wait.
so I made you a little playlist. But if I had to pick one artist, I would say Fela.
Ooh.
Fela would be the artist that I think would pair the best with this. And the reason is because of his rejection of like religious oppression
Hmm.
and oppression
Hmm.
in general. He was a practicing he practiced Yoruba, which is like an indigenous form of spiritual practice to Africa.
Hmm.
And he like, pushed away like oppressive religious like beliefs that he felt like dominated um, a lot of his country and the politics of his people and suffering and was the cause of a lot of that sort of repression. And I feel like Satrapi does the same, though I think she just flat out rejected like just the fundamentalist like
Sure.
Islamic regime and she was just like done with all of that. She just I think she didn't want it to be used as like religion to be used as a form of control and
Mm,
oppression. So I feel like yeah, both of them speak to, Fela, his work is very joyful, and but he'll still talk about some fucking deep stuff in his lyrics, like if you're really like sitting and paying attention,
sure.
you know. And so I think Coffin for Head of State
Mm,
is the song
mm,
um
mm.
from Fela. And yeah, that was when I thought about it. I thought about it and I was like, I feel like Fela is the guy, and then I looked for a song and it was that one. So
Dope.
I
Mm,
just feel like they have that intersection, between them
absolutely.
and two very like different people, but again, speaking to all the things that we just sort of like uplifted in this conversation and highlighted, is just um, there are points of connection in all types of humans, and I think, um, yeah, that's what came to mind.
That's fire. And I get a playlist. Get out
And you
of
get a
here. Hey. You
playlist.
know what, Fela, one of my favorite songs of all time is his Trouble Sleep Younger Wake 'em. And
Mm.
that one's like it's like an 8 minute, 9 minute song.
They're
Like
all like that. They're
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, no,
fucking long
right?
as yeah. I
But
love it.
yeah.
I feel like I remember you DJing a lot of Fela when we were like in our, in our like mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s.
yeah.
Like, I remember you playing a lot of Fela actually.
Yeah, well, shout
At
out to
it.
my brother for, he's a professional musician and he essentially was the one that
Yeah,
put me on to anything that wasn't hip hop and R&B because that was like the only thing I listened to.
that makes
And then
sense.
he's
Shouts out
like
to Aki.
he was like there's other worlds out there, bro. And so shout out to Ak for that one.
Yeah, that
Um
makes sense. Shout
yeah.
out to the Broskies.
Well, and then so, this last question, or not really a question, actually, it's a sentence frame. I was wondering if you could please complete this following sentence. People should read Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi because dot dot dot.
Because it's deeply humanizing, it's complicated, it's perfect, and it's imperfect at the same
Ooh,
time.
yin yang.
Yeah.
Love it, love it. Well, Pamela, again, thank you so, so much for your time, the gift of your time, your energy. This was such a treat. I have so much love and respect for you, and look forward to listening to my playlist.
I'm gonna send that as soon as we hang up, man.
Mm,
Thank you so much, Colin. Like this was very helpful. It's very regrounding for me to just think about like where my rebirth as an artist came and through this book and I just it was so fun. I went and I reread the book and was like, oh, okay, now I remember why I like this book. So thank you
mm,
for this opportunity for putting all of us on this platform through this podcast and wishing it so much longevity and
thank you.
abundance of good conversations, man. Like you're doing something really beautiful here, and I appreciate it very much.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, love you, family. Shout out to baby Pamela and baby C, and being in
Aw.
dialogue and our being in dialogue with them.
I
Um,
feel like we would have been friends in the playground, man.
oh, for sure, you already know.
Little kickball friends.
Absolutely, that tetherball every time.
Tetherball, yeah.
Well, so folks out there listening, thank you so, so much for joining us. Wishing you a wonderful, fabulous, strong week or weeks ahead. I don't know when the next time I'm gonna jump on here, but thank you for joining, and we hope you enjoyed the flight. Peace.